In the ever-evolving world of business, a revolution is underway. Welcome to Hyperconnected Journeys, where the future of success begins right now. I'm your host, Ian Faison, and I'm joined by my co-host and industry leader, Raj Porkesta, to guide you through the intricacies of network transformation. We're here to be your compass in the realm of network transformation in a world that's customer-centric and interconnected. Join us on unleashing the power of hyperconnectivity. Welcome to Hyperconnected Journeys. I'm Ian Faison, CEO of Caspian Studios. I'm joined by my amazing co-host, Raj. Raj, how are you?
Good, yeah. Good to talk to you again.
Indeed. And we have a special guest. Ranjit, how are you?
I'm very well, yeah. Thanks for having me on the show today.
Yeah, excited to talk about all the cool stuff that you're doing at Deloitte, your background and everything in between. So let's get into it. What was your first job in technology?
I was an aircraft engineer right out of engineering school in maintenance operations. So not a rocket scientist, but more a mechanic. But that's where I started.
Amazing. And flash forward to today. Tell us what it means to be the technology leader at Deloitte.
You know, it's been a bit of a journey in a minute, so to say. But I did that. I spent some time going back to school to study finance. And then I did a bit of a startup, which didn't go too far. But then I joined the firm about 24 years ago. And then here, I feel like I've had, so many different jobs. I could have worked for a bunch of different companies as well. Now, I worked in different industries, in public sector, in technology, media, and entertainment, in financial services. Now, I led our cloud business. But last year or so, I've been leading our strategy and technology group. And the reason we brought it together is, partly because you guys are no stranger to this, but there's no strategy today without technology. So us bringing those two together was an integral part of how we show up in front of our clients and how we think about our own strategy. So I own strategy, technology, ecosystems and alliances, and innovation, which is really where we think the magic happens. If I do it right, that's where the magic happens. If I don't, then that's where great ideas come to die. So I'm hoping it's the former, but the verdict's still out.
And how do you think about connectivity playing a role in Deloitte?
Well, connectivity is central to what we do. We are a multidisciplinary firm. So we have at least, 20 different practice areas. Now, they're all go to market with their unique skill set and their unique depth in a particular area. We also have all this technology we're working with. So between how our practices come together, the power of the firm really is in our ability to be able to weave all those different practice areas around a client's problem. And our ability to be connected, integrally connected and, client back in these situations is what I think differentiates us from anybody else. And then to layer on top of that, all the convergence that's happening with technology today, it only makes it, I guess, easier, but at the same time, more complicated. Easier for us because, connectivity is so central to our DNA and our fabric. So we think we can, bring ourselves together even around converging technologies, but difficult because a lot of our clients are navigating all this convergence that's happening and the rate of change. So, certainly I think we have a role to play. So, and this is just a central topic today for everything we're doing.
Quick question, Ranjit. You said you started off as a mechanic in the aircraft industry, and now you're here. Now, in the journey that you had, what are the big changes or shifts that you've seen in technology, and what do you, wish was there with you when you first started your job?
Great question, Raj. So maybe, three big things. Obviously, many things have changed, but the three big things I think that stay with me. One is that technology has become so central to our clients and our business. It's no longer an enabler or a supporter. It is the business. So many of my clients, their product is technology itself. So that's been a fundamental shift in how we've evolved over the last, 2-3 decades. The second thing, which is again, we're all living it, is the rate of change. We've never seen this kind of rate of change, and it keeps accelerating in terms of what it took us 5 years to adopt or 4 years to adopt the next PC. Now we're looking at, 18 months and 12 months and 6 months. So I think our ability and broadly our clients' ability to be able to embrace that rate of change is causing some fundamental tensions on how organizations can adapt so quickly and be flexible and agile in their ability to be able to adapt and pivot. And then the third thing I think if I had known, to your question, 20, 25 years ago, I think it would have been around how much more we can do with software that we were trying to do other ways. As an electrical engineer or mechanical engineer, etc., we didn't realize at that point this big pivot to software. So, the airline I worked for, even any auto manufacturer today, has more software engineers today than they have automotive or airline, aircraft engineers, which is, again, if I'd known some of that earlier, maybe I would have made a pivot sooner and, retired sooner. But anyway, yeah.
Thank you. Thanks.
Yeah, what was the startup that you started many years ago?
Yeah, it's a good question. We started that time. Location-based services were just about getting some recognition. So we at that time identified that if we could truly track location on individual cell phones, we could use that data to triangulate where people were moving, and more so, what is the density of traffic movement, and based on that, be able to better predict the right route from point A to point B. And we took it on a roadshow. We got a bunch of great funding. We had some real backing as well. But I think the idea was a little ahead of its time. So we think. But it's really what Waze does today. But this was in the late 90s, early 2000s, just pre-dot-com bust. But it was
Oh,
essentially that same idea.
wow.
Yeah.
Amazing. I
That's what
always
we
love hearing
do well.
the old startup, the step along the way. It's so fun.
Yeah, for sure. I think it accelerates our learning coming out of school. We thought, this is what we do all our lives, etc. And then you get back into a regular job and you start at the bottom of the totem pole. So it took us a while to realize that, you don't only engage with CEOs and heads of businesses, you actually have to make your way up. So it was a good, humbling experience to come back into the corporate world after, flying high on a startup.
Okay, so let's get to our first segment where we're going to talk
Yes.
about building a digital foundation for enterprises. Um, yeah, what trend are you watching right now as the top trend for both you and your clients?
I think, obviously the trends are what they are. We are closely watching the AI trend, if you call it that, right? It's really come at us as like a tsunami in the last year. We continue to play close attention to cloud and to AR, VR and to quantum and to blockchain and cyber, as you would expect. But more importantly for us is really the application of the trend. How does it make a difference to our clients? How do they move the needle on their business and their capabilities and their products? So we're quite focused on separating the noise from the signal, and where there is signal, how do we apply that to real business problems and real challenges that our clients have? So that, I think, at a macro level is how we approach these trends. So that's first. The second thing, obviously, like I mentioned to you, is the rate of change itself. So, while we'll keep an eye on the trends, but I think our clients, including ourselves, have a real challenge in front of us in our ability to be able to pivot quickly as the next trend or the next wave catches on. And for us to stay competitive, our ability to be able to pivot and have that level of structural agility is really important. So we also spend a fair amount of time preparing ourselves and our clients for the future. Sometimes it's known and sometimes it's unknown. So we, rather than spending too much time crystal gazing on the trends, we spend more time in saying, look, there are lots of unknowns, but here are some no regret bets you can make in terms of just structural agility. So that's the second thing I'd say. Now, and then the third, which we're also spending and actually quite focused on, and a large part of our business is on the whole adoption piece of this. So as these trends continue to come and come at us at a faster pace, typically organizations' ability to adopt these trends and these changes is pretty low in general, and not because they're not structurally agile, but also because people have a certain capacity to learn and to pivot. And today, the rate of change is far exceeding people's capacity to embrace that change. So, that gap between those two lines, if you can visualize two lines on a graph, the rate of change up there and the ability to adopt that change, that gap continues to widen. So, a large part of our time is also spent in narrowing that gap or helping our clients better embrace the technology, more from a change org hearts and minds perspective.
Yeah. So if I can ask a question, Ranjit, right
Yes.
now, you're wearing the hat of strategy and technology officer for Deloitte, right? You've also seen the customer side of the business. Now, how hard it is to deploy or execute on strategy and the vision for the company, vis-a-vis when you actually went with those kind of things to your customers and said, look, this should be a strategy, this should be a roadmap, and this is how you should execute it, right? So do you see that there is difficulty when you're doing it within the company, or it's the same both ways per se?
Yeah, it's a great question, Raj. And I often get that question and we get asked all the time. I think consultants in general are really hard clients. So, and then the fact is doing it to yourself is always really hard, which is why a lot of our clients hire us as well, because it's like trying to do surgery on yourself, right? So, as we're trying to drive this transformation internally, we're also finding that sometimes it's just really, really hard to make some hard decisions on how to pivot, where to drive automation, how to think of our business and do buy, hold, sell across the portfolio. But that's where I think discipline really counts and is important. And we're really focused on doing this the right way and keep sort of a broader existential question in mind so that, if you don't do this now and do it the right way, then we have bigger challenges ahead of us. And that keeps us sort of focused.
So, as chief strategy officer and CTO, how much time do you spend with clients versus working on the business?
In my first year, because I was just coming into the role, that I committed to spending more time understanding our business, particularly since it also requires me to have a deep understanding of our tax and our audit business and our global businesses, etc., which I was relatively new to. So I chose, deliberately not to spend too much time with my clients in the first year, so I could do justice to the role and the job and the attention it needed. But now, as I'm coming to my second year, I spend about 25%, or my aim is to spend about 25% of my time with my clients externally. Even through my first year, I kept one or two clients that I work with, continue to work with closely. And that I think is the right balance for what I need to do for my job right now. It also keeps me very relevant in the marketplace, but more so, we constantly learn from our clients as well, and also helps challenge orthodoxies internally and vice versa. So I think it is a good symbiotic relationship both ways to have that kind of a balance. And I hope at some stage to even get to a 50-50 model, etc. And in the firm, most of our roles are for a certain period of time, and the expectation is that everybody will go back to client service after they do their tour of duty. So I too hope that over the next few years, I will go back to client service, which is really the highest order role one can have in the firm.
Yeah, it's super fascinating. I mean, I think obviously in a company the size of Deloitte, and the amount of clients that y'all work with, and I'd imagine that there's and just how long obviously the company has been around too, that there's immense challenges, or opportunities, if you like to put it that way, on the internal technology and thinking about building technologies and working on optimizing processes and all those type of things, which sort of always needs that entrepreneurial spirit done, and then working on the client side, obviously you get all sorts of different challenges and opportunities and exciting stuff as well.
Yeah, for sure. And it's a great point because, like all large organizations, after a point in time, you really have to stand back and look at things and see how, you can go look at urban legends and orthodoxies and challenge them because
Hmm.
they just, everybody gets set in their ways, which is, partly why we also continue to rotate leaders through these roles because they can bring in some fresh perspective and keep us agile and nimble. But it is often, if you look away for a while, it's quite possible that one can get stale in one's capabilities and our core platforms and processes. So we're constantly challenging ourselves and making sure we are quote unquote fit for the fight.
Ranjit, a question, you've seen companies large and small, uh, new and pretty established, right? Now, when you look at those companies, which do you think has more challenges? Is it the established companies which are large, or established companies mid-size, or new companies large? Which of them will have more challenges, opportunities, and things to tackle with?
That's another fascinating question, Raj. I don't have a really good answer. I think that companies will have different kinds of challenges. I think the big companies have a fundamental challenge of being able to pivot fast enough to be able to look at their cost structure and think about things in a more Gen AI, cloud native way. So I have like big clients of mine who run, for instance, large reservation platforms for like $300 million a year as a TCO and a run rate. And then I have some smaller, mid-stage companies that run a similar platform with the same number of properties, if not more, for $30 million a year. So there's a 10x difference between the two. Now, for the big companies to come from 300 million to 30 million is next to impossible unless you do a scorched earth strategy, rebuild everything from scratch. Could take them, 5 years with a 50% chance of success. The smaller companies, on the other hand, can scale pretty quickly, but they still have a challenge with brand, with customer acquisition, with, just their ability to be able to. So, I think different challenges. I do believe that in the longer run, though, Gen AI native thinking, cloud native thinking, extreme automation will prevail. The
Mm.
question is, will the bigger companies be able to pivot fast enough? Whether they create greenfield new organizations that will do that for them, and over time they deprecate the old and build around the new, or a completely new set of organizations will take over. I think it's probably going to be a mix of those two.
Fascinating. Yeah.
Yeah, it really is. And I think we're going to see a lot more upheaval. I think the barrier to entry continues to get lowered, every year. So, for a new startup to enter into a established space and get to a billion, as is getting, that time frame is shrinking. But I think we're going
Hmm.
to see more disruption like that, and a lot more innovation, a lot more entrepreneurs. I was looking the other day, there are 200,000 Gen AI native, companies out there, some form, that have mushroomed in the last year. Now, many of them will probably not, see another year, but still, it just, creates so much more innovation and so much more fuel for growth.
Yeah, it's amazing. When it just, as with all startups, always it's like, whatever the 1% that make it and the 0.1% that make it big. But it also just fuels so much of that sort of like entrepreneurial, those ideas. We've had CIOs that we talked to in the past where, they just love working with startups. It's like they just bring startups into their org and say, "Hey, we'll be customer 1 or customer 5 or whatever, and we get to have a huge say in building features, and we get to have," it's like they're like, "I could have never built this team to work on our project. That would have cost me a fortune, and now I get to have, stuff purpose built for us, in all intents and purposes, as they're building out this product." So that sort of stuff is so exciting, and it brings, some excitement and innovation and, and energy
Absolutely.
into a company.
Yeah, and it's interesting because we do that a lot as well, and so do a lot of my clients. Now, the downside is while they enjoy the speed and the agility and the challenge and the and just the innovation, the downside is sometimes the startups just get overwhelmed with the
Mhm.
weight of the enterprise between contracting terms and meetings and the pace of change, etc. Now, here's a startup which is like 15 people. And here's a big enterprise that has 30 lawyers in every call with those 15 people to try and get an MSA written. So they kind of, they really lose the will to live, if they're not careful, right? And so we also have to be very careful. Sometimes, and we relate that to the elephant dancing with the butterfly. Everybody's well intentioned, but if you're not careful, it doesn't end so well for the butterfly.
Just getting through procurement is
That's
is,
right.
uh
It's a
is,
real
uh
nightmare.
yeah, the elephant's tail is
Right.
procurement there, I think perhaps. Um,
Right.
yeah, no, it's a great point. It's a great, challenge too for all those startups. And that's why it's hard to make it. Um, I'm curious, as you think about sort of like disrupting yourself or however, you think about innovation, and digital transformation, like, are you on a digital transformation journey? How do you even think about that? Is it, innings? Is it just, is it a marathon? Is it something that you're just constantly looking at? How do you think about that?
Yeah, I think, you framed it there really well. I mean, we've used the term innings. We're in the second inning of a 9 inning game. It is a marathon. So we're constantly doing that. We kind of evolving different capabilities and services as we go. We're trying to make it more part of the fabric and DNA so that, you don't need to think about innovation as a standalone function, or you go to these five people, they will innovate for you and the rest of you can just sit back and watch. That doesn't work. It hasn't worked for us. We've also struggled a little bit with, the fact that you, in this journey, that you get into this thing about like perpetual transformation, right? And you get transformation fatigue. So people are constantly sitting at the edge of their seat, waiting for the next big transformation lever or the next big program to come hit them, which is also not a great place to be. So what we've had more success with, and a number of my clients as well, is just make it part of BAU. So if you own a particular product or a function or a service, part of your job is to continuously evolve that and make it better. And that's part of your OKR, and that's part of how you get, evaluated versus a third party team that comes in, swoops in, looks at everything, craps on everything, and then, tells you what to do and then takes off, right? So, that gets old pretty quickly. This sustained model where, owners themselves or, product owners, business owners are held accountable seems to have more legs to it and feels a little bit more normal.
Rajit, I was speaking to a few CIO friends of mine, and I heard a very interesting perspective. They said that transformation is a reality; it's going to happen, but specifically, the CIOs and the CTOs are faced with a challenge that if there are problems, then if they need to be fixed and it's going to take around 3 years and $1 million, the board is not going to be patient with them. Therefore, band-aids are a reality. I was like taken back. I was like, really? Band-aids are the reality of today, and you're waiting for that to happen, but band-aids are the reality of today. Is it what you also see?
Yeah, for sure, Raj. I mean, you think about it, right? If the average CIO's, horizon is between 18 to 24 months, he or she is largely trying to get through the next 2 quarters. And they don't necessarily want to embark on a 5 year journey with a 50% chance of success and bet their career on it. So they're saying, well, let me get through this, let me get through my tenure, and then when I, strengthen my position, I'll go pick the right fights. But this isn't the hill I want to die on. And especially one that is high visibility, goes up to the board. Not all the time. There's certainly CIOs with great intestinal fortitude that take the hill, have the right support from their business leadership and from the board. But when you don't have that level of support, then the chances are you say, you know what, let me do the bare minimum in this area, focus on these two areas. This is what's really going to drive the most impact, and pick their battles that way.
Got it. Okay.
Yeah. And we often get involved in those conversations, helping them think through the portfolio, what will keep them out of trouble, but also drive the most amount of impact and make those smart choices, because, budgets are always constrained. The list of things are always more than the budget can afford. So it's, those trade offs.
What's the best way of doing trade-off, Rajit? Specifically budget to technology to the needs of various departments.
And like any good consultant, I can come up with a framework that can show you how to do risk reward and but I won't, bore you with that. But I think for the most part, there are certain things that you cannot do away with, which cause franchise risk and get you into jail, can shut down the franchise, etc. Those are non-negotiable. Then the rest of the things, CIOs typically have to make a judgment call on saying which ones will drive the maximum business impact and or drive some efficiencies. They can plow back and fund their budget to go
Mm.
pick the next five. So, it's a sort of a part judgment call. You can't overly engineer these things. But, once you get out the mandatory stuff, then you got to focus on the other ones to say most impact and then go pick a few of those.
Got it. Okay.
I'm curious, just how do you think about like making investments and things like that on your end, and like what are you excited to make investments in, and how do you help your team make those decisions?
Yeah, I mean, we're constantly looking at that. And we have a rolling thunder sort of approach. So it's not like once and done. Because sometimes, we in the past, we've done this, right? That you just make your investments for the year and then you sit back and watch them. But we found that that's a little bit myopic because, good ideas don't just come, the 31st of May. They come through the year. That's our fiscal year. So they come through the year. So you want to be able to make sure there's an opportunity for people to be able to bring them forward and get them funded and all of those things. So one, we do that continuously. Two, we kind of look at things two ways. One is doing things differently, which is really looking at our own business today and what can we tweak and what can we change and how can we do things better. But fundamentally the same things, but just differently, leveraging AI and AR, VR and quantum and things like that. And then doing different things, which is higher risk, which is could be a totally different profile for the business in 5 years or 10 years. The risk profile of both those, like I said, is different. The first ones often drive some revenue, but certainly some efficiencies and things of that nature. The second one are net new businesses altogether, which could be $1 billion franchise for us or 2 billion or something down the road, but it needs careful funding and careful sort of holding also to make sure that the antibodies don't, destroy it inadvertently. So that's kind of how we look at our portfolio in both those broad buckets. And then we go through a review process that continuously feeds the ideas. And then if we don't get, sufficient outcome, then you also have the discipline to shut them down, which isn't always easy because everybody's always saying, give me another quarter and they'll get better. But, we are quite disciplined about when an idea is run its course, when you put it on the back burner, come back and revisit it versus continue to keep, funding it. That way we also make room for new ideas throughout the year.
That's a very interesting perspective because one of the things, Ranjit, I've seen is that when a new idea comes in, people hold on to it, right? Even if it's going downhill,
Right.
people really hold on to it and don't let go. So you're saying that you have a framework in place which looks at it, and if it is going downhill, put a stop to it, right? So that
Yeah.
you fail early.
Yeah, exactly. Right. Fail early, but also be dispassionate about it.
Mm.
Because otherwise, inevitably people get emotionally involved with their idea and want to continue to fund it, etc. But somebody has to dispassionately look at those and say, no, it's time to move on. Or you do a zero-based budget the next go round, and you have to justify why it needs to be continue to be funded. Obviously, if we can apply that to 85% of our portfolio, we call it a success. There's always, 10, 15% where there are shades of gray where we got to figure out, whether to keep it going. Well, this looks like a bet we need to continue to make, even though we don't have full information. But largely, we try and adhere to some sort of a construct like that. And many of my clients are like that as well.
So I'm curious, the obviously professional services industry has changed, massively over the past 4 years. You got this globally distributed workforce. You're obviously handling all sorts of sensitive client data. There's, all of this. You have, more data and more information and people all over the place. And how are you thinking about, infrastructure? How are you thinking about edge, and dealing with all of it?
Yeah, I mean, it has changed tremendously, and we expect it to continue to change. The other day, we were having a conversation on what it must look like to be a professional services practitioner at Deloitte for the 178 years that we've been around, and the kinds of changes those folks should have seen over the years with the Great Depression, the wars, all kinds of other, flu and famine. So then, in retrospect, you feel like, okay, well, our problems aren't that massive. But that said, we've certainly seen a bunch of change. And data, as you rightly pointed out, is central to what we do. As you can imagine, a professional services firm largely relies on data and insights and our ability to be able to execute against, a plan. So we are, have been over the last 4 years now, maybe even more, really investing in the appropriate data platforms. So the right data is available on the right platform to the right people. And as we are finding out even more so with Gen AI, that unless your data is all sorted, classified, categorized, appropriately, provisioned, Gen AI can only go so far. So, we're fortunate that we've had a place already and a bit of a running start, but we still have work to do as we think about how do we get the data out. We today have a data platform that subscribes to over a few hundred different data providers. We are up to 500 plus data sets that are available to our folks, depending on their particular need and the place of need and the time of need. We curate that data and make it available, but we also enrich it based on other data sources that sometimes are proprietary data sources, sometimes are sensitive client data, sometimes are third-party procured data, regulatory data, etc. as well. But based on the need and your level of, I guess, your privileges, you get, appropriate access to different sorts of data. And that is kind of how we do that through a advanced routing engine, and now increasingly through Gen AI as well, as a way to be able to use the engines to be able to source the right data to the right source to the right user.
So, Ranjit, specifically in professional services, how much of it, uh, how much of a good uh, personnel will have tacit knowledge and will depend on data?
I think historically that's how it has been, that you are an amazing tax professional because all this information is in your brain, and you've spent 35 years really focused on transfer pricing, and that's really your ability to be able to bring it to a client, and your clients are buying you for that. You are the product. But over this last several years, and certainly the last four, but maybe the last decade, the product just shifted from being that personnel to being software come data plus a real product in that sense. Hence, you see the turbo taxes of the world, etc. Now, of course, in our business, there's still a pretty significant dose of insight that's provided by the professional, including hand holding and enterprise clients working, all other things that need to happen, kind of the non-functionals. But the data itself has moved from being a person as the product to being more of a platform as a product. And not everywhere, but we're certainly moving in that direction. And if I fast forward the clock 5 years, I think that will be more the case. And it'll
Mm.
really be the application of that platform or the product to a particular client situation, which is where we'll spend most of our hours. But the product itself will probably get more codified and, you know, as a service.
Got it. Yeah, makes sense.
And the same thing I think is happening in so many other professions, right? Doctors are finding, all the knowledge in their brain is finding its way to some chatbot, or, things like that in every industry for that matter, financial services, trading, all kinds of, advisory businesses as well, including, financial advisors and things like that.
I wish my financial advisor was a brilliant one and make me a billionaire, but I haven't found that bot yet.
Me too. If you find one, please do direct them my way, or it my way, or them my way.
100%. And you do it too. You'll
Yes,
be my best buddy after that.
yes, for sure. I'm still gonna find my financial advisor. I think he's still not come back from summer break. So, that's the other challenge.
Well, they're doing great at least.
That's
That's
right.
good. Yeah, how do you think CIOs should be thinking about business strategy as it relates to IT infrastructure modernization?
You know, I think a couple of things, right? Alluding to some of the points I made earlier. And first is that the rate of change is going to continue to accelerate. We know that almost for a fact. And there are implications for that. That's why I'll just mention these and then come back on how that should inform their strategy. The second, of course, technology continues to be the bedrock of most businesses, and increasingly so. And then three, that most businesses will go through a massive disruption in the next decade, if not more. And that may even be a continuous, disruption, ongoing transformation, etc. So that has implications on how you think about your strategy. So as I think about strategy, for address the first one, while you have to have appropriate strategy, it has to be flexible and nimble. So you can't necessarily put all your eggs in one basket and then wait for the market to shift, because it will shift quickly enough. And by that, I mean, when you're making a decision about, do I have all public data centers? Do I have a combination of public and private? How much do I invest in GPUs? What kind of private LLM should I think about? How should I think about even quantum? Should I be investing in it today or not? Our advice would be, then you think about your infrastructure in general, you need to be able to create it in modular fashion. So you can switch up, switch down, swap out, etc. over time, and it's not one big behemoth, which will become that much harder for you to pivot as you look at new tech, and the tech life cycle or the refresh cycle continues to shrink. So that's one. Two, I think the fact that technology is the product certainly means that tech infrastructure budgets will continue to grow. And I think CIOs in general and CFOs and business leaders have yet to come to grips with that. They haven't been able to truly document or understand where is the budget shrinking because of efficiencies and where is the budget expanding because of new demand. And because those two get intermingled so much, they only see a budget increasing and they don't have the sophistication to make the difference between those two. I think that's a really critical element to this, because we will continue to see new demand skyrocket. And the existing demand, one should be able to squeeze and drive more efficiencies. But if you throttle the new demand, then you're not in a good place, or will not be in a good competitive place 3 to 5 years out. And then the last point about disruption, I think increasingly from horizontal technology groups between the CIOs group and the business tech group and the infrastructure group, I think we need to break those silos down and look at more product platform groups that are front to back, particularly to your, opening line about convergence and how, connected world is getting, or interconnected or hyperconnected world. The ability to be able to connect front to back on, here's the experience on a payments platform, here's the underlying application, the platform, the infrastructure, and that is owned by one person who's then also continuously evolving and innovating on that platform, but also responsible for the P&L front to back, I think is the way to go. Then you can also make deliberate decisions about, do I need an ACH or a wire transfer or some other product, or do I switch it off and turn on a new one? And gives you natural to be able to be agile and do buy, hold, sell across your portfolio. So I think all those three things need to be in some form be baked into a business strategy around infrastructure.
Yeah, that's a very interesting perspective. You talked about specifically, throttling the new areas. That's not going to make sense for the future. And you also said that, existing areas or operations, how do you generate efficiencies, right? Now, I've also seen this getting confused amongst a lot of clients of mine. Uh, is there any tips for the listeners in terms of how to kind of segregate them and ensure that they are not kind of confusing both of them?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, there are now pretty sophisticated models which look at your product portfolio to understand where is the product increasing its infrastructure and technology needs, because the volumes are going up. So for instance, you're a credit card company and you do payments with your various merchants. And if your payment transaction sits on one particular part of your infrastructure and you've gone from, I don't know, 500 million transactions a day to 1 trillion transactions a day, then you know very well that that's, new demand, but on an existing platform. But then you launched a new, payment platform that is B2C between, a bunch of different consumers that are retail consumers. And you now know that that's a brand new infrastructure and you're going to see growth over time. So that would be new demand in my mind. I
Hmm.
think where it gets gray is when people are not able to look at it front to back from a product perspective. And what often happens, and I'm sure you see this all the time, Raj, is that at the back end, the only thing CIOs see is their overall storage price, consumption going up, or their infrastructure, GPU or CPU consumption going up, and they don't have an ability to be able to tag it back to a specific business product. So it just becomes one big hodgepodge. And as a result, they're constantly trying to defend that to the business owners, who are saying, you know what, you've increased your storage price on me, or so it doesn't come together under a product P&L or something like that. So this takes some discipline to get there. But once those clients of mine that have really gotten to ABC costing or product pricing, product profitability, have really reaped the benefits of this, and we'll continue to do that because it's a one-time exercise. But then once you're on the other side of this, then it gets easier to be able to manage and forecast and budget and plan.
And Rajit, this is very interesting. I've not really heard a lot of my clients doing this. Do you also suggest that, if there's a new product which is being launched, right, which is in its infancy, needs some love and care, uh, should it be treated differently on the infrastructure, or should it be given, obviously it will not be given a different new infrastructure. It will have to be on the shared infrastructure like everybody else, whether it's data center, storage, blah, blah, blah. Should it be given, special care? Is that a best practice, or it's with everybody else, but looking at the growth opportunities which is there, it will be maybe treated a bit differently, or how is it?
I personally think that is the right answer on two levels, Raj. One is that when you're launching a new business or a new product, likely as not, there are some antibodies today in the system that may or may not support the growth of that, whether it's channel conflict or somebody else's incentives conflict with the incentives of theirs. So you start a new ACH product and you've been doing wire transfers, chances are many of your wire transfer customers will move to ACH, and the wire transfer folks will start to feel the pain, etc. So regardless, there is a case to be made to say if you're starting new businesses, you should do them in a greenfield state so that the antibodies don't come in the way. You can create its own channel, particularly if it's going into new markets and new products. That's one. On the infrastructure side, also, I would make the case, and which is why popularity of cloud took off, and it did, was every time people wanted to launch a new product, they didn't want to go to the existing infrastructure team. But it would take them 60 weeks to get anything provisioned. And not to mention, they'd get burdened with all kinds of, allocation, things of that nature. They rather just went to, a public cloud provider, an AWS or a Google or somebody, and then just spun it up. And while it was growing, they were only paying by the drink. So as a result, till it got to some scale, they were only paying marginal cost of that usage. Versus when they went to the internal infrastructure teams, they got, hit with a big bill that would kill it right at inception. The cost of that would, totally overwhelm the product profitability. So I'm of the view that certainly for newer products, R&D, where you're launching, you're trying to get to MVP and scale it, it is better to do an arm's length construct, and then over time when it matures, it can come back into the mothership.
Well, Ranjit, it's been awesome having you on the show today. We unfortunately, we got to get out of here. You're a busy guy. Is there any final thoughts or any final piece of advice to, other technology leaders, CTOs, chief strategy officers out there on how they can, improve in 2025?
Look, it's been really fun, being on this chat. Thank you again for inviting me. And if you ever invite me again, it'd be an honor to be back on. In terms of your question, I think the one thing I would say is that, folks in my role, in my seat, need to be bold and move fast. I think, it's easier said than done, but we get all caught up in existing bureaucracy and pace of change and all the naysayers and why we shouldn't do it and all the things that are at risk. But I don't, for us to be looking back a decade later, kicking ourselves that we didn't take, swing for the fences, didn't take our chances, didn't, be part of what is really truly historic this decade, will be a real travesty. So all I would say is that, this is our time. We should go out and swing for the fences. We can really make a difference and drive some material, historic change in the world.
Fantastic. Couldn't agree more. Thanks again so much for joining.
Great. Thank you both for having me. This was wonderful.
Thank you, Ranjit. Thanks, Ian.
Thank you for joining us on Hyperconnected Journeys, where we explore the minds of technology innovators, future-proofing their digital infrastructure. Go ahead and leave us a comment to share your thoughts on today's episode And be sure to hit that subscribe button wherever you listen to podcasts to stay updated on our latest episodes. Thanks so much for listening. Until next time, unleash your own power of hyperconnectivity.